Okay, hello. I wonder if I'm the only one in the chat right now. I had three people waiting. That's dropped down to one, so I thought I'd just go live and see who's listening. Figured I'd keep this going. If nobody shows up, well, fuck it, I tried. So, yeah, it looks like it's utterly dead. Oh, hello there. Well, I guess the counter here on YouTube is completely wrong because it appears like you people are still here. Hello, Eloise, and was it Caesar? And I'm not going to even, was it Caesario GPN? I'm sorry. Okay, so we got 5 of you in the chat now. That's good enough. So not too long ago, there had been in YouTube, as I had mentioned in the description for this video, that there had been a hashtag going around on Twitter called hashtag men are not very good at. And it was essentially yet another feminist hashtag to slam men, just to put blatantly. And this one was blaming men for not talking about their feelings. And that was why so many of us are killing ourselves. Now, I have heard this again and again and again. And it seems with every year, as people become more and more sick and tired of feminist madness and the I guess, cringy blue hairs that like to scream at people, this message of, oh, we just want you to talk about your feelings seems to be coming up more and more, as if this is some sort of expression or statement of empathy, which it isn't. I mean, if anything, it's a backhanded slap of, oh, we want to help you, but you're still broken. It's your fault. And the reason I find this so empty is because I've been on this earth for 4 decades, and let me tell you, men don't have a problem with talking about when they're hurting. It's people don't listen, or to put it another way, women don't know to hear it. We talk differently. I mean, it's just that simple. Men talk and behave differently, and we work through our problems differently. And so if we don't communicate them, and I've noticed this when you hear feminists say, well, if you just talk about your feelings, they're asking us to talk about things in ways that men just don't typically communicate in. And furthermore, when men do talk about their feelings, the instant accusation is, oh, well, you're an incel, oh, you're dangerous, so we need to lock you up. There's something wrong with you. Well, of course you're that way. You're broken. Oh, you need to be packed full of drugs. That's what's wrong with you. And I guess for myself, the reason that it hits home so hard is that in 2000, I myself was on the verge of suicide. And I know that a lot of people talk about that, talk about being suicidal, and often, put bluntly, there is being suicidal and then there is being suicidal. There's the state of mind in which you feel like you don't want to go on anymore. And that is legitimate and that is totally real. But the state that I was in, I found actually a little more frightening in that what I was going through at the time, there was an actual physical pain to what I was feeling, and it was mental. It was a mental strain. I was going through the worst of my post-traumatic stress, and the constant thinking and panic and state of high alert. Because what happens is when you have post-traumatic stress, your ability to process the world and process danger is just completely out of whack, and you're trying to process danger that isn't there. And if that has no place to go, it takes its toll. And I had hit a point in which it physically hurt. And it hurt so much that killing myself really did seem to be a viable way to make the pain stop. And that's what terrified me, because I didn't want to die. I really did not want to end my life. But at the same time, the pain had gotten so bad and I had no outs. I had nowhere to go. I had nobody to turn to. And I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do. And so I was going to share my story, how I got there, because I went right to the, I guess, the dramatic part where I'm talking about suicide. But it was a long journey getting to that point. And, they fucking say we don't talk about our feelings and when we're suicidal. Well, fuck that shit. We're going to talk about it right now, and I want to hear from you too. And if any of you want to share, you just drop it in the chat, and we'll see where this goes. So the beginning of this story goes back to 2 weeks after I graduated high school. This was in the early 90s, and I had just graduated high school, and I was in that wonderful summer where essentially you've got the entire summer to do whatever you want, to have a good time, to hang out with your friends, and everything ahead of you seems like it's an open road. I mean, I'm off to college once summer's over. I was dating a wonderful woman. I mean, there was just a lot of good things going. And within the second week, a friend of mine had stopped by the house, and he had said, it was his birthday. And he said, well, Denny's gives free food to people who have their birthday. So I figure it's my birthday. I want my goddamn meal. Now, I don't think he really wanted the meal. He just wanted to be obnoxious, which was fine because we're teenagers and that's what teenagers do. So my sister, my friend Matt, and I all hop in Matt's car, and we're driving down to Denny's. And first we stopped at a mall and kind of hung out. Southern California, summer, the 90s. Of course, we hit the mall. Of course, there was a secondary attraction because living in the Inland Empire as I did, the Inland Empire, like much of Southern California, is a desert pretending it isn't. And what I mean by that is that California, much of its climate and much of its vegetation is strictly due to the fact that we're pumping shit tons of water to grow plants that would otherwise not be there. So every time you hear about Californians talk about nature and the environment, just realize where they're living is a complete illusion only made possible by technology. And that if they were to strip away all that technology, there wouldn't be palm trees and shrubs. It would just be scrub brush and cactus until you got to about the beach. So, we're outside. It was about, 105. So hitting the mall was a good idea because it was air conditioned. So we hang out at the mall. We fuck around. We just do shit the teenagers do. And then we decided it was time to hit Denny's. And on the way to Denny's, my friend's kind of speeding. It's no big fucking deal. He's speeding, honking his horn at people. And we notice somebody's following us. It was a Jeep Cherokee. And, for a while we're thinking, okay, whatever. But the Jeep kept following. And Matt kept driving. And the Jeep kept following. And so we went in a loop a few times. And he kept following. And it was like, okay, this guy's following us. And none of us have any idea what the deal is. The easy assumption was, okay, well, maybe Matt pissed somebody off honking at them and speeding. Maybe he wants to kick his ass. Who knows? And so we're driving. And I don't know why Matt thought this was a good idea, but he drove back to the neighborhood I lived in and thought, oh, well, I'll lose him in all the streets there. Everything looks the same there, which it did. I mean, it was the suburbs. And we're driving around, and the guy just will not give up. And finally, Matt tries to do something clever. And that is, we're at a double lane road, and Matt pulls an illegal U-turn. And the Jeep guns it, smacks right into the side of the car. And the guy jumps out and says, I've got a gun, motherfucker. You're all going to die. And this guy was in his late 20s. He's waving a 9mm around. And I mean, there was this really surreal moment where I'm in the back seat and we're passing by. And I looked right down the fucking barrel of the gun as he's kind of tracking the vehicle. And still at this point, none of us really believed this was happening. We didn't think anyone would be so goddamn crazy as to take shots at us. I even remember Matt up front saying, oh, it's got to be a pellet gun. It's got to be a pellet gun. And anyways, as the barrel tracks, I was tracking the vehicle as we drive by. I look in the back seat of this guy's vehicle, and there are these two kids, neither over the age of 5, as far as I could tell, looking terrified. One of them was on a baby seat, and they're looking right at us. These little blonde-haired kids that just gigantic eyes watching us. And as we drive away, pop, 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 pop. Now, the argument, the police report says that it was 3 shots. I swear I heard 4. Who the fuck knows? But I can say that as we drove away, the rear view mirror, the driver's side mirror took a hit. The passenger side rear tire took a hit, and the trunk took a hit. And I laid down in the back seat because I didn't want my head anywhere near the glass. And we're driving away, and we're thinking, oh, good, okay, it stopped. We got away from this nut. And he's running around, he's chasing after us with his gun. And we haul ass, and we take a corner. And Matt doesn't know the tire has been shot out yet. And I feel something wet on my back. And unknowingly, I just go reach around, and I pull my hand back, and it's covered in blood. And for, I don't know, a split second there, I flipped. I lost my fucking mind, started screaming, I'm going to die, I've been shot. Oh God, I've been shot, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And just this intense panic set in. And it was this instant notion of, usually you hear the stories, oh, my life raced before my eyes or flashed before my eyes. That didn't happen for me. That didn't happen at all. My experience was of this weird sense of hyper awareness where it was like suddenly everything slowed down, and the chaos of the car and everyone screaming in it and the shooting, everything pulls in and everything starts to look really crystal clear to me. And there's this hyper awareness that this is it. It's over. That that future I thought was laying ahead of me, the college and whatever was to come next was over, that I got my handful of years in my youth and my teens, and then in a matter of minutes, if that, it was all going to be gone. Everything I knew, everyone I loved, everything I valued, everything I'd hoped to be and achieve, everything that made up me as an identity was going to just be gone. And I think that's the roughest part about probably being an atheist. And I mean, I realize that's, trust me, guys, I'm not one of those assholes on YouTube who rips on Christians. I'll be upfront. In a lot of ways, I envy you guys for the faith you have. And in those moments, it isn't the end. Or for you, you have some sort of notion of security. But for me, I felt like the plug was about to be pulled, and that was it. This computer's RAM was going to go blank, and there'd be nothing there afterwards. It would be gone. Just what atoms scattered across the void, right? And that's a terrifying experience, and one that's haunted me ever since. So that was the realization just then, that at that point, life became real. And there's that saying that you really aren't an adult until you know you're going to die. And truly, knowing what death is and really looking down that abyss and feeling it, especially in such a violent way, is so different. And it was such a rude awakening at that age, to be so young, to have it all just thrown right at me in a matter of seconds. And then, bam, something happened. I don't know, but I reached around. I realized I wasn't bleeding out, that if I slapped my hand over the wound, the blood was staying in. And I had this crazy adrenaline rush where suddenly I was like, it's not over. I've still got a chance. And I was elated with hope. It was like this instant rush of, I can live still. And I knew I wasn't out of the woods, but my friend was going to drive us, Matt was going to drive us to the hospital, which would have been a half-hour drive. And I think if we had done that, I wouldn't have made it. And in a split second, I just thought, go to, and We had a friend who was literally a block away. His house was a block away, and I said, "Go there. We'll call an ambulance." And we drove up. We get there, and nobody was home. But okay, this is. I'm laughing because the guy's house was such a shithole. They never bothered locking the door. They was like, who the fuck would rob us? And it really was. It was a garbage house. Everything was just thrown around, garbage everywhere. And so, fortunately, the door was unlocked. And we ran in. I called 911. And within 45 minutes, I was in a hospital, which was incredibly fortunate. I don't recall much of the ambulance ride. My sister was up front with the paramedics as they drove me, and all I recall is them sticking me with all sorts of needles, and my sister saying that I was screaming in agony. No memory whatsoever of it. They wheeled me into surgery. The people within the emergency room are all kind of cracking jokes. They think this is yet another Inland Empire gang shooting. So they're laughing at me and say, "Oh, you're throwing signs in the wrong part of town again? Oh, did you pick a fight were you in the wrong territory?" And then when they asked me who shot me, and I say, "Oh, it was a guy in his 20s. They're like, "Yeah?" He was a white guy with kids. And they all just stopped and looked at me. And then they get a good look at me. The goth kid, right? My hair is spiked up. I'm wearing the combat boots and all the black. And suddenly they realize, I guess they weren't even bothering to look for the most part. They were just yanking my clothes off. They realized I wasn't a gangbanger, and they were like, suddenly reality crumbled for them. They didn't know what they were dealing with anymore. I would say one of the scariest things was being wheeled up into the surgery theater and me counting backwards, and remember seeing all the gear around me then just fading out. Supposedly I woke up on the table. I don't remember that either. That might be why I get the weird alien abduction dreams, is probably because I woke up during surgery. And then after that, I was in a drugged up state for a few days in a hospital bed, and it was, because of the way that it played out, I had this cushion of, again, the surgery, the recovery time, the amount of drugs they'd shot into me, that in a sense, I didn't have to really think about what happened. And when I got out of the hospital, I felt fine. I mean, I was injured. I was injured badly. I mean, to this day, I still have problems with my stomach muscles because they had to cut me open and root around in my stomach. What had happened is the bullet had gone through the trunk, and there had been a whole bunch of. My friend actually worked at a golf course doing mowing the lawns and watering flowers and just kind of upkeep. And so all that stuff was in the trunk, and the bullet had gone through all that and slowed down. It had slowed down enough that when it hit my rib and broke through, it lodged in my stomach. And the only reason it got that far is it was an armor-piercing round. So it's kind of a catch-22. If it had been a lead bullet that had hit me, I probably would have died, but then, well, would I have? Because it probably wouldn't have gotten through the trunk. On the other hand, it did get through the trunk because it was an armor-piercing round, but it didn't mushroom inside me. So that was my situation, and I'll get into why and how that happened and who it was and what happened to the son of a bitch who shot me another day. The short version is that he was a volunteer police or sheriff's deputy for the city of San Bernardino, and they had issued him the bullets and the gun. So anyone who tells you gun laws would have prevented this, no, they would not. Wouldn't have done a goddamn thing to stop this. And in fact, all of California's fancy gun laws weren't able to keep this guy in jail. So, for a long time after the shooting, I fell into the lie that we needed further gun control. And I mean, it's an easy assumption to make. I mean, you don't want to accept that people are that evil. But as time went on, and I really looked into the laws and looked into my case and looked into the reality of it, what we're looking at is it isn't gun laws that are the problem. Our gun laws are ridiculous. What we need is to look into what changed in the culture, because guns were far more available in the 40s and 50s and 60s even, that there were places where you could just walk into a liquor store and buy a revolver, and there weren't these kinds of shootings. Something changed in the culture, and that's a discussion for another time. But anyway, the upshot being is, for a long time I didn't deal with it. I thought I was okay. And I mean, what teenager wouldn't like to think, oh, I got shot and was able to walk away completely mentally intact? I'm awesome. And that is exactly what I thought for a very long time. But over the years, cracks started to form, and I slowly started to get crazy. And when you're, I'll toot my own horn, when you're very intelligent and you're extremely logical, you don't want to believe that you're susceptible to craziness. You want to believe, oh, well, I'm different, I'm thinking clearly, especially if you're young and invincible. And so as reality started to fall apart for me, I was convinced this stuff was really happening. And yes, that does include the alien abduction dreams. As well, no, I couldn't be crazy. This couldn't be the result of getting shot in the back and surviving and now dealing with the post-traumatic stress. No, gray aliens have really chosen me for a lab rat. God knows why, and I was seeing ghosts, and the hole I plummeted down was a very deep one. And moving into the Bay Area to go to school there was possibly the worst thing to happen, because in that environment there was no shortage of flaky mystics and burnt out hippies of my parents' generation, and then wingnuts that were my age, that were more than willing to feed into that bullshit and tell me, oh yeah, that's really happening. Oh, I'm psychic, I can read minds. And then you had the whole conspiracy craze with the X-Files, and everyone was just obsessed with conspiracy theories at the time. And I went deep into that hole of insanity. And I would say that went on until I was about 25, 26. And when I cracked hard. And the cracking point really was flipping out over Y2K and all the various doomsday scenarios that were bombarding me. And for having a mind that was looking and trying to process the notion that there is no safe place, that death can come at any moment, that you can make every preparation in the world, and some nut with a gun or could walk up and shoot you, or for whatever reason your appendix gives out, which also happened to me, by the way, shortly before I lost it, by the way. Right before I completely cracked, my appendix gave out on me. That was a lot of fun. And so having all these doomsday scenarios that were huge and gigantic and uncontrollable thrown at me were a very easy path for my brain to feel all these things. And at some point, I don't know where, I realized that I'd fallen down this hole, and that every assumption I'd had was based on false information. And when I realized my base assumptions were incorrect, I realized that entire inverted pyramid of logic I'd built, of aliens and conspiracies and computer viruses and asteroids, just fell apart, and I didn't know what was real anymore. And I cracked, because the worst part is now I didn't have anything to worry about. I didn't have a rational, to my brain at least, source to freak out over, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I realized there was a point where either I was going to stay that way or I was going to crawl out of it, and it was going to hurt and it was going to be hard. I just didn't know how hard and how much it was going to hurt. And so by 25, I lost it so bad that I ended up moving back in with my parents for a time. And I kept getting crazier and crazier and crazier over that period. And I tried to find help. The social services were no use. But the worst point, and this is now getting to the suicide part, was sometime in 2000. Um, I was at my worst. I was going into panic attacks every 15 to 20 minutes, and this would go on for hours. And these were the type where I was hyperventilating, my body would go cold, I'd fall over. And it was beginning to get to the point where it literally hurt in my mind. And as much as I wanted to talk to people, my family was of no fucking use at all. They tried. I will say that at times they tried, but at the same time, they did not want to talk to me. They didn't want to listen. It was more like, well, that's not real, so why do you care? You were shot a while. It was yeah, that was when you were a teenager. Now enjoy your life. And that was it. That was about the sum total of what they tried to do to help, which as far as talk to me. I mean, they did other things. I can't knock them for letting me stay at their house when I was completely not functional. Um, I can't knock my mom for trying to cheer me up, although I think I was at one period when I was doing really bad. She said, "Well, you know what I find when I'm not feeling good? I like watching funny movies." And she went and rented the two funniest movies she ever seen. Little Nicky and was it Tommy Boy? No, it was the one where Adam Sandler was it was Mama's Boy. So it was Mama's Boy and Little Nicky. And she subjected me to two goddamn fucking Adam Sandler films. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, Mom, are you trying to get me to kill myself? But on the one end, there was an interest from my family to want to help, but they didn't really want to hear it. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to process the fact that there were legit things going on inside my brain that were going. What they wanted me to do was to stand up, brush myself off, and get back to work and get on with my life as if it was that easy. And when I was going into my very worst phase, when I said I was starting to get to that point where it was hurting so much that I was becoming, suicide was looking like like a viable way to make the pain stop. They left me all by myself at the house to go on some barbecue with the rest of the extended family, with absolutely no way to reach them. And they knew the state I was in. They were aware of how bad it was. I didn't want to go, which was trust me, if you knew my extended family, you wouldn't want to go either. But they left me anyways. And I lasted about maybe 12 hours the next day. And I started calling every number I could, every suicide helpline, every one of those homes that you can stay when you're not doing well, everything, public health. And what it came down to is either I wasn't the right gender or minority to get their time. And again, thanks a fucking lot, California. Glad to know you give a shit. The only, and I do mean the only part of one that really responded initially when I was calling everyone is finally I called the paramedics because I didn't know what else to do. And they hauled me down to public health where a grumpy old woman looked at me and said, well, stop thinking about bad stuff, gave me some downers and told me to leave. And that was that. Went home, took the drugs. That made me sleep for a little while, but that was about it. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just as bad, if not worse. Finally, and I do mean finally, there were some decent people out there who did finally fucking listen. And hold on, I'm going to drink something. The only people that fucking listened was that I finally, out of desperation, called a youth home that was for suicidal teenagers who were trying to get off drugs. So they were suicidal because they were coming down off of drugs. And I explained my situation, and even though I didn't fit the bill, I was too old and I didn't have a drug problem, they lied on the paperwork, so the stats are wrong, but they lied on the paperwork so I could get in, and they put me up for 2 nights. They fed me, they watched me, and the college students volunteering there, who were strangely my age, which was a little surreal, um, were probably the best help I got for a very long time. And after that, they were the ones that made it clear of what kind of prescription I really needed. And it was kind of weird because, again, these were college students who didn't have their degrees, helping out, and they were the ones that knew what the fuck to do. And yeah, they recommended I get on Zoloft, and I did. I wasn't pleased with it, but sometimes, I'm not a fan of dumping kids on drugs. Growing up, I had had some issues in school through my elementary years, and my parents' instant solution was to stick me on drugs. The truth of the matter is, the reason I was doing bad in school is that my very first friend and playmate, my cousin Dunk, had been murdered at age 5. And as a 5-year-old, I was the same age, I was trying to make sense of that. No, he's doing bad in school. Give him drugs. So naturally, I was resistant to go on drugs. But these college students talked to me and they said, look, you're dealing with post-traumatic stress and you're dealing with brain chemicals. Right now, the truth of the matter is your brain chemicals are the problem, not you. You're thinking clearly. We've talked to you, and they talked to me a lot. They said, we talked to you. You're thinking clearly. You're thinking logically. You're trying to make sense of this. No, your brain chemicals are keeping you so jacked up and afraid you can't reason correctly. And they were right. And over time, it took a long time to get my shit together. I mean, I probably didn't really come back to reality until I was 28. And I mean, that's a long time. You think about it. I accept that I'm losing my shit at 25 and 3 years. I went into isolation over those 3 years. I didn't watch TV. I didn't leave the house much. Hell, not much different from now. I don't leave the house much. I aim to change that, though. So if you live in Arizona, I'd like to meet you and hang out. I didn't leave the house much in San Diego because everyone was woke and there was no one to hang out with anymore because they'd all left. But the end of that story really is I tried. I mean, I really tried to talk about what I was going through and what I was dealing with. And I also did go through a phase where I called extended family members. They did not want to hear it. And similarly, and I find this thoroughly disgusting, when I was a teenager and I got shot, my parents paid for my sister to get therapy, not me. Why is that? I mean, why is it? My sister, she was having trouble sleeping. She had been freaked out. She'd been scarred. No shit. She saw her brother get shot in front of her. But the person who got shot, fuck it. He doesn't need it. Well, he's a boy, was their feeling. So that's my story. I mean, people had asked about it on Twitter, and I felt that I could not do it justice in, 36 characters? It just was not going to do it justice. And, we're hearing a lot about men my age now committing suicide, and I'm not surprised. And they act like this is something new. And really, no one seems to remember that period in the 90s where, well, Gen X teens were knocking themselves off quite a bit. There was a memorable span of a year or two in high school where it was every other few weeks, every few weeks, somebody had killed themselves at my school or worse. And I don't know. I just feel like nothing's really changed in that regard, and that these feminists who are, men. Oh, what is it? What was the hashtag again? Men are not very good at talking about their feelings. I would say no. It's that today's woke culture and the psychological establishment, or the mental health establishment that has been colonized and overtaken by the left, doesn't want to hear it. I mean, unless we're going to cry and be effeminate and express it the way that I guess in a female way of knowing, they don't want to hear it. They feel it's hostile or scary. Um, then I think there's a shortage of men that are in the establishment able to talk to men, which is another problem. Really, the only people that I ran across that understood what I was going through and really helped me were soldiers who'd been to war. And I'd talked about in the past that they got it, they understood. And what I came to realize is the mindset of being completely jacked on the sense that at any moment death could come. That isn't crazy in a war zone. That keeps you alive. That's normal. But once you get back home here, um, it's completely out of place. It has no place to go. And of course, it's going to go wrong. So that's my story. There's probably going to be more to tell. You may have questions for me, but I thought I'd go through the chat now and see what you guys have to say. Because, yeah, if men aren't good at talking about this stuff, well, fuck it. Here I am. I'm talking about it. And I invite you to do the same. Maybe we can do this in the future, and I can bring some of you on to talk on air about your situations and experiences if you want. I feel, this has nothing to do with writing and comics or music or any of the other stuff I usually talk about, but maybe it'll serve a useful function all the same. Requite says the abduction dreams are probably part of the brain. The abduction dreams are probably from the part of the brain that can trigger proximity sense. There's an interesting study where they can stimulate that part, and people sense something standing over them. Yeah, I agree. I've actually done a lot of research into the abduction phenomena as well as sleep paralysis, which I suffer from extremely badly. I had it in my youth too, although it wasn't nearly as terrifying. Now it is. And that would be another one to do a whole episode on, just the whole experience of abduction phenomena and sleep paralysis. I've written a lot. I've done a lot of research as well, as I said. And yeah, I believe that part of the brain gets stimulated is probably also tied to sleep paralysis. Oh, there you go. That's the next comment. I have similar with muscle spasms at night and sleep paralysis. Crazy experience. Glad you survived. Well, thanks. I'm glad I survived too. It's been an endless well of material to plumb for my writing, fortunately. I guess I can put it to good use somehow. The sleep paralysis is a surreal thing. Obviously, it's something that taps into something very deep and very primal in the human mind, and that there are universal symbols that we all see. And as I had mentioned in other shows, what's weird is a number of the things people see are cultural based. And for a long time, our culture had been the old hag witch or the incubus. And now more and more, it's becoming the gray alien. Whereas in other countries, they might see a little elf or a beautiful woman or some sort of weird vampire creature. But the one thing that all cultures seem to see is the shadow man. And I only got that maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The shadow man started showing up. And frankly, I prefer the gray aliens. The shadow man is a terrifying thing to have happen to you. For me, my experience is he always, unlike the grays, which kind of like phase in, and they're kind of they're like ghosts. They're not fully tangible. You can run your hand through them. They're watching me. And the fact that they're watching me is very disturbing, but I kind of made peace with it, and that I had a dream where somehow I came to the realization the grays were representing some sort of higher understanding that was beyond me being able to grasp, but that it wasn't hostile. And it was just that it was so beyond me is what scared me. And once that came to peace with that, they don't bother me so much anymore. But the shadow man is more tangible, and it always has this shadowy form, and he'll either come through the door or climb through a window and plunge a knife right into where my bullet hole is, and or the scar over the bullet hole, and I'll wake up screaming, which not fun at all. I had one last night, in fact. All right, let's see. Computer robots. Ishi, do you still have a relationship with your mother? It's strained. It's really a shame too, because prior to 2016, I really felt like I had finally gotten an adult relationship with my mom and dad, that we'd seen past our differences, that we were interacting, and that I would be able to share their autumn years um, on good terms, and that I could kind of make up for all the lost time of having a horrible childhood with them and all the years that I spent away from them. And then Trump derangement syndrome happened, and that's a story in itself. I kept warning them for about 2 years straight that if the two of them and the rest of my extended family kept going down this woke path, eventually we were going to hit a point where they were going to see me as an enemy. And boy, did that day come. And I'm here in Arizona now. And that's one of the reasons I left, even before I realized the state was, even before I knew the state was beyond repair. About a year and a half ago, maybe two, before I realized, no, California's doomed, I knew I needed to get away from my family. And Kat and I started looking. So it's taken quite a long time to get here. So unfortunately, it's a very strained relationship. Let's see. Oh, wow, not a lot of comments, actually. Hope I haven't horrified you all. I don't have much after this, guys, so I would say start shooting questions my way or sharing your stories. So from David Harris, your story really hits home to me. Dropped out of college due to panic attacks. My parents hated therapy, but my sister persuaded me to go. My parents hated therapy, but my sister persuaded me to go. That plus meds helped. 2 years later, 2 years later, soon to finish college. You know, that was pretty much my experience too. Once I got my head together, I finished up college. Um, that was the main reason I had to stop. I probably would have been done a whole lot sooner. I feel like I lost about 5 to 6 years there of my youth, which I don't know. It is what it is. I shouldn't fret about it. But yeah, if you have any more to say, David, let me know. And I'm glad the medication works for you. Do you mind me asking what you use? For me, it was eventually I found the perfect balance was an extremely low dose of Lexapro and Wellbutrin. And I mean, they're very small amounts, which I'm happy with. Requite. It scares me every time. And the wife will smack me to wake me up because I would lock up moaning. Yeah, I know, I feel that. I have had multiple concussions, so that's probably why it happens why it is for me. Having a wife that can hear you screaming or moaning and shake you awake is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and that is exactly what happened last night. By the way, Cat rolled out of sleep, woke my ass up, and it was better than screaming, right? And I stayed up for about an hour and a half till the panic or till my heart stopped beating rapidly. Wows writes, did San Diego turn into a hellhole? That makes me sad. You know, maybe that's one of the reasons it took me so long to leave California is for the longest time, San Diego remained immune to all that, being that it was more conservative and had so many military bases. But really the downswing was when the state government up in Sacramento decided they were going to go to war with Trump and that they would do everything they could within California to spite Trump. And the moment that happened, illegal aliens started flooding into the state. Money started going to all the things that it shouldn't, essentially making it easier for illegal aliens. Sanctuary laws, crime, cops were no longer allowed to enforce laws. Crime started going through the roof. And when I left, when Kat and I first got our condo in San Diego, it was a tiny place, but it was ours and it was nice. I mean, it was a nice, nice neighborhood. And we were willing to live in a smaller place to have a good neighborhood. It was the kind of place where if I needed to go jogging at night, I could go into the park, not a problem. We could do 2 a.m. walks if we wanted to. When we left, there were repeatedly shanty towns kept springing up in the park, and it was no longer safe. Garbage started piling up. Our car kept getting broken into. Both times that the car was stolen and recovered, what a shock. The radio was tuned to a Tijuana televangelist station in Spanish. Lovely. Or radio evangelist, I guess. So take that what you will. And yeah, it started becoming dangerous. You can call me a horrible racist if you want, but also there were some very devout Muslim families that started taking over the complex, and they were not very friendly, so we were ready to leave. Let's see. Loquacious Primate, appreciate hearing your story. Love your channel content. Thanks. I'm glad it's useful. Hey, Owen. Owen, if you're on Twitter, contact me so I can start following you. Okay, yeah. All right. Oh, you're talking about Blade Runner. I'm sorry, Owen. I didn't answer your question about what the difference between the various cuts of Blade Runner are. I'll get to that another time. It just really doesn't fit right now. By the way, I watched Guyver. I didn't realize there were tentacles in it. David Harris. Yeah, it was interesting that my older sister was on antidepressants and I didn't even know it because she was afraid of how my parents would react. Your parents like holistic types, or are they Christian Scientists or something like that? I know that some hippies are really against that kind of thing. What's the deal with them? Yeah, anime acid trip. San Francisco is like poor man's Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas is safer and nicer. Yeah, I know exact change. Muslim isn't a race. It's a very, very... I won't say anything. Fuck it. It's just... look, I wouldn't have liked it if the Westboroughs had moved into my complex. Why should I be any happier about devout Muslims who are just as crazy? I don't see how that's offensive. David Harris, also, university therapists, city therapists were not good. In hindsight, I also think it was beneficial to talk to a male therapist. Agreed. Very much agreed. Yeah, when I was in university, the therapist or the people, the mental health people there just wanted to stick you on Prozac and make you leave. Oh, and Lister, we'll talk about Guyver another time. I watched Guyver. I guess it was the very first Guyver ever made. It was about this teenage boy who finds, I guess, this alien artifact, and it turns him into the Guyver, and they steal his girlfriend. And then this really hot redhead named Valkyra gets the other Guyver suit, and she's evil. And the Guyver Hentacles, when they interface with her, they interface with her anus and cooch, among other things, and she orgasms, which was unique. I didn't really expect that. I was expecting a little more, I guess, explosions and kung fu fights. But yeah, that first one was enjoyable. It was very, very 90s. If I had to put it anyway, it struck me as kind of very 90s action anime. It reminded me a lot of the stuff that were traded around on videotapes at the time before anime had really taken off. Okay, anime acid trip. Been on suicide watch twice, and a second time I was straight up and took the meds. I've been doing better now, though I need to take my sleep meds on time. Yeah, as I say, me and sleep are not good friends. I cannot sleep well, and that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And the big thing I keep running into is sleep meds can make me sleep, but they can't seem to make the nightmares go away. And my issue isn't getting to sleep per se. It's when I get to sleep, what happens afterwards. And, you get those nightmares where they're so bad that you can start getting to the point where you kind of avoid sleep because you're afraid to. And I have that trouble. David Harris. They're your normal Christians. My dad particularly is just against medical help therapy in general. His solution to everything is read the Bible, which is fine, but I just need more. Well, it's true that having faith can help you through those things. I mean, it definitely has a solace for those who have the faith to do it. But I don't care how strong your faith is. If your brain chemicals are out of whack, you can't control that. Faith isn't going to change that. Yeah, sometimes you just need to turn those chemical knobs in your brain, lower a level and raise another, and there's nothing more you can do about it. I would say the problem with medication is that we've started dealing them out, far too liberally, and not using them only when it's required, and they're using them as a crutch to avoid helping people. Intrusive neighbors are bad in any case, Exact Change says. Yes, they are. Dissatisfied convert. I was going to avoid saying that, but you're absolutely right. The Westboro Baptists never blew themselves up or killed anybody. Muslim extremists have killed a lot of people. And it didn't help that when I was in San Diego, the nearest mosque, and it wasn't that far away, was the one that had given shelter to the 9/11 hijackers. So I wasn't too thrilled about that. Zach Change. Okay, I'll look into that version of Guyver. I don't want to talk too much about Guyver about this right now. It's the True Tales of Suicide stream. We can talk about Guyver's suicide. How about that? Requited. Sorry. Side note: I was glad to see your first book was available again. Ordered both the other day. I've been meaning to pick it up for ages. Well, thanks. Did you order it from Amazon or me? If you order it from me, I'll try and make sure to sign it. And apologies to anyone who got the first printing. This second printing is actually better. I like the cover art a hell of a lot better. It's the same cover art as before, but the colors have been cleared up and it's a little sharper. And the back cover is completely new. And there were some typos that I corrected, but it is what it is. Enjoy. Good evening, Mr. Boomer. Exact Change. Mental health disorders are a pretty deep issue. Yes, they are. I'm not going there. Dissatisfied convert. Medication should not be the first choice, or at least not long term. I would agree. Yeah, medication should not be the first choice, nor should it be long term, unless, and that is unless your brain's broken and there's not a lot you can do about it. Sometimes those scars are etched so deep they're not going away, and I've had to come to terms with the fact that where I'm at today is probably going to be my normal. I don't think I'm ever going to get any better. This is probably as good as it's ever going to get. I tried twice to go off the medication, slowly weaning off of it, and it was disastrous both times. And they were like years apart when I did it. So maybe someday, who knows, maybe there'll be some medical advancement that can rewire my serotonin level and I won't go bonkers anymore. But it's not good. Let's see. Where are we going? Exact Change only. When it comes to depression, keeping a positive attitude is important. But it's way easier said than done, that's for sure. Faith can help by being an anchor or a foundation to build off of, but never fight alone. Yeah, and unfortunately for me, I mean, again, I don't want to get into a religious debate. I will say time and again, I have deep respect and even a little envy for those of you who do have faith, and I will say to my dying day that if it were not for the influence of Christian morality and its innovations of every life mattering, that no one's above God, that all should be judged equally, and a few other very forward-thinking views, the West would never have become the great place it is. So we forsake it at our own risk. But for myself, there's a number of reasons, just historically, and I can't embrace the miracle aspect for one, and there's some other things. But at the end, partially I looked down the face of death and I didn't see anything. Was the other thing that kind of nailed it and put the nail in the coffin for me. But I don't want to take that away from you. I mean, who knows? Maybe with someone with faith would have saw something different in my situation. But it's not gonna. It is what it is, and I'm glad for those who have it, who can use it to get through things. The best I can hope for is, I believe that there definitely is a tendency toward order in our universe, and I have faith in my fellow human, especially people like you guys. David Harris, I would say hobbies are good. Hobbies and a good job are great for establishing a normal routine that helps one not stress about the larger things. For me, it's a normal routine. I don't even know what my hobbies are anymore. I will say that I am not functional in the workplace. I've tried and I get fired from every job that I'm in. I'm extremely fortunate to be in a situation where I can work from home as a writer and doing jobs on the side as a letterer and an artist. I know that largely that's also possible due to the fact that Kat works a job that has a stable income. So even though I get paid decently, sometimes well, but decently, it is not a regular check every month. And I will value every day the fact that I have the opportunity to be in this environment that I'm in. Let's see. Dissatisfied convert on the brain rewiring. That's an incomplete sentence. Finish that. Loquacious primate. What's the best way to support the channel? I have lurked on a few streams and appreciate the work and intelligence that goes into your work. I apologize if you said that on a recent vid. We don't say it enough, to be honest with you. I really should be trying to make this more profitable, considering we're doing this more and more. But I don't know. I'm your archetypical creative type. I'm more interested in the content than the money. Maybe Kat, since she's the more money minded of the two, I should start bringing her in here to beat the drum. The best ways to support us is that we do have a subscribe star. I will share that in a second in the chat. And that is a regular donation. When things settle down a bit more, I want to start doing long form videos again. I have a few adventures in awful that we will definitely do. It's just a matter of when. We're in week 3 of the new house, so we're still settling in. So we'll do it when we can, I guess. Yeah, I'm looking over our live streams. I have not been including the links. That's very bad. Let me get the links for you. But yeah, we have a subscribe star. Also, we have t-shirts, coffee mugs, and various paraphernalia that you can purchase from TeePublic. And a lot of those are fun. Let me see. I think I found. Okay, here's the subscribe star link. I'm going to put it up right now. Or not. Well, geez, how do you do this? Sorry about this. So yeah, we have a TeePublic account in which we sell t-shirts, coffee mugs, some other fun stuff. Subscribe star. But the other real useful thing is buy my books, review them on Amazon, and tell your friends about them. Word of mouth is extremely popular and effective. Right now, with so little media being trustworthy when it comes to pop culture, it's very hard for good books to even be noticed or to find its audience. So you can go over to Amazon.com. All of my books, Case File Arkham 1 and 2, Case File Arkham 1 and 2, World War Kaiju, the Titanium Rain audio drama, and Utopiates are all available. Okay, I'm sharing the TeePublic links. And the hell? What just happened? Sorry about that. And it looks like we're having trouble again with the TeePublic. See, if Kat was here, none of this would be happening. Oh, we're at dead air. That's exactly what you need, right? Okay, let's see. There it is. Okay, I got the link for you now. Okay, here's the link to the TeePublic account. Everything should be there. And now for... Oh, that isn't... Okay. I'm looking for the correct subscribe star link. It looks like YouTube's been screwing with our files. This isn't good. I'm sure this is real riveting radio, isn't it, guys? Hearing me mumble to myself. Anyway, let me read a few comments and answer them while I dig for the other stuff. Let's see. Oh, there's an MDMA comment. Okay, let's see. Exact change. Oh, yeah, you guys are talking back and forth. Never mind. Aged boomer. I'm late to the conversation, so ignore it if it's already been covered. Do you think modernity has anything to do with the increase of suicide by men in our society? That's a chicken and the egg question there. I mean, the easy answer would be yes. But at the same time, other nations aren't suffering from this problem. I believe Poland doesn't have this problem. Let's see, Poland, South Africa doesn't have this problem. Russia doesn't have this problem. Really, what we're looking at is more a direct result of a society that has stripped its young men of purpose and meaning. Not to go too far down the Jordan Peterson route, but I think a large part of this is postmodernism, trying to replace the notion of values, right and wrong, empiricism, all the things, the glue, or culture itself, the glue that holds us together as a people, and replace it with nothing means anything. That is the problem. And I don't know, maybe young women function better in that environment. Maybe they excel in that environment. I have no idea. But I know for a fact, young men, or in general, men at all, need purpose. And without purpose, what happens? Well, you start getting, first you start getting rebels without a cause, causing chaos for chaos' sake. You get depression. You get people who live through their video games and won't leave their little closet, like in Japan with the wizards and herbivores. You get listlessness. You get obesity. Men are wired to do. Most people or most men don't, when you say, what are you? They don't say, I'm a man. Especially in the West, what do they say? Well, I'll answer. I say, I'm a writer. I go, I'm an architect. Oh, I do drywall. That is almost always the answer. And also removing men from the family, I think is a massive part of it. We don't have fathers anymore. I mean, my father, I applaud him. He stayed with the family, but he was never fucking there. And it wasn't like in my grandparents' generation, where sure, my grandfather was not home a lot, but that man was busting his ass working 2 jobs to make sure that my grandmother could stay home and have the life she wanted, which was raising 5 children and providing for 5 children and giving my parent or my mother the kind of life that I think any kid would have wanted. So I know that my grandfather was working 2 jobs that were both terrible, but he knew it was with purpose. My father, that was not the case. He didn't come home because he didn't want to. Now, part of it was my mom was a screeching harpy, and I probably wouldn't have wanted to come home either, but you know, there were still 3 kids at home, that needed a dad. And if you look at the Black community, fatherless is the number one problem with everything that is troubling that community. Poverty is not the reason. It's fatherlessness is the number one reason. And I had met a writer once, a very successful writer. I wish I could recall his name at the time. And it was at a reading. And he did a lot of urban inner city type writing. And it was really good stuff. And he was very well respected. He was kind of taking off. And the ironic part is he wrote Black characters that read very real, but he was a Japanese guy. And people were like, well, don't you think this is appropriating culture? And this is what a reading. And he says, well, no, this is what I grew up in. And he started to lay out his story. And his story is that when he was growing up, his parents, he was born in the camps in California during World War II. And around age 5, he'd moved to Compton with his parents. And they lived in a tiny, tiny shoebox home in the worst of the worst slums. And that, all of his friends were Black, and most of them, were getting up into trouble. And he too was getting up into a lot of trouble. But then he came home, and Mama-san beat the crap out of him. And when that wasn't effective, it says, I'm going to tell Dad. And that was effective. And you start hearing his story, and he's unfolding it. And he was in the exact same violent, impoverished, lack of opportunity environment of all the other Black kids in the 50s and 60s in Compton. Yet he, out of all of his friends, rose out of it to be an extremely successful novelist. He said everyone else he grew up with either had kids and ran off or were dead. Or kids ran off and were in prison or were dead. So you ask me, what's the factor there? It wasn't poverty. Poverty was not the issue. So I think there's been a wholesale assault by the left and the postmodernists and the communists to dismantle the American family. I mean, the ideal communist state, there is no family. The state is your family. And postmodernists, the last thing they want there to be is right and wrong, and an agreed upon reality that serves as a backbone for a culture. It's anti-human, it's disgusting, and frankly, I would say it's morally bankrupt to the point of being evil. And I have no problem calling things evil when they are. That was my soapbox. Enjoy. Computer Robots asks, although I think Gen X does have a higher suicide rate, that is true. They do, significantly, although we'll have to see what happens as the millennials start to hit midlife crisis and realize they wasted their youth running around being offended and wearing dresses and shooting themselves up with hormones and acting like girls when they should have been out there actually achieving things and doing what young men should do. And no offense to young women. There are a lot of great young women out there, but I'm specifically focusing on boys who've been feminized. And I know for a fact my mother tried to feminize me. I think one of the worst things that ever happened to me as a kid was going through the extreme guilt I felt over enjoying the female form. As a little boy, I don't know, I was hitting puberty, what, 11, 12, it started to get those feelings about the girls who were growing boobs in school. And just the extreme guilt I was feeling at that age because my mom had imposed upon me this notion that somehow the mere act of finding that shape of a woman being oppressive and horrible and some sort of mortal crime against humanity and all womanhood. So, it's sick. And there's other things that my mother did to my brother, which were far worse. And I would say what's going on with my brother, but the last time I talked about it, I had people at my door screaming at me and threatening lawsuits, so I'm not going to say anything. So anyway, sorry, computer says, Ish, Ishi, do you think, although I think that Gen X does have a higher suicide rate due to a traumatic background or horrible childhood, do you think that that the second generation is more likely to commit suicide? Second generation. Do you mean the second half of Generation X? Yes, if that's what you mean. If you mean something else, clarify. Let's see. Dissatisfied convert. Sorry that I wrote backwards. Shrooms and MDMA. I have shown good results with veterans on the brain rewiring necessary to get past the snowed with meds. You know, I'm very curious about MDMA, not necessarily to take, but I'm fascinated by the fact that people who take it do see gray aliens. And before they break through to that, oh, what is it? Other reality that it's supposed to transport you to, they all seem to describe sleep paralysis and fear, and that the experience is very much like sleep paralysis. You know, they talk about the kind of the loud rushing sound and how things start looking super detailed and hyper realistic. There's kind of an out of body sense, which is definitely there in some of my sleep paralysis states. All right, let's see. Owen Lister, I'll be curious about Adventures in Awful. Actually, right now, the two we're thinking about doing is we want to do a really bad G.I. Joe comic for an Adventures in Awful. And I want that to be an ensemble cast where I get a bunch of you doing voices. And also as a quickie, we want to do that, what is it, that new Marvel comic, Star, which is just god-awful. You know, oh, sorry. I lost the comment. Sorry about that. Benjamin Random. I can tell from the stream's title this will be a happy experience. Actually, it isn't that bad. I think actually it's been pretty productive. But yeah, I could make it darker if you want. You want me to put some goth music on? I'm sure I can pop on The Cure. I mean, their the Cure album entitled Pornography kind of plays like a suicide. Let's see. Loquacious Primate. Didn't mean to derail you. I like to give back to worthy content creators. No, I appreciate it. The fact that you do makes a massive difference. I'm still trying to dig up. Like I said, unfortunately, YouTube's been really screwing with my channel. I mean, they obviously do not want people like me to make money here, which is a fucking crime. I don't know what their problem is. Let's see. Oh, there it is. All right, let me share it. Okay, I'm putting the Subscribe Star link into the chat right now, guys. So there you go. And that helps a lot. After we hit a certain amount, really our aim, and it's going to take a while, but our aim is we'd eventually like to make enough money on that Kat could quit her job and do night editor and Adventures in Awful full time. That would be awesome. But in the time being, you know, just anything he gives helps a lot, especially after the move, let me tell you. Requite, I think it's more the government and parents trying to pushing teachers into being the ones raising their kids. That's absolutely true. In fact, what's kind of creepy is my mom was a teacher for most of her life, and she really had this notion that it was her role to take kids out of the house and to train them and indoctrinate them into the world, and that it was good to take especially conservative children and train them to think correctly. She was all for any ballot measure that would keep kids in school longer and away from parents longer. It was frankly creepy. That's right, exact change. Women don't function like men or vice versa, and that's a good thing. We need each other. Let's see. Yeah, Japan and Korea do have huge suicide rates. And, you know, it's no shock that Korea is currently having its own feminist revolution with crazy high divorce rates now that it's been legalized there, and it's tearing their society apart. It's also interesting that their very first female prime minister, as a president, I forget which, turned out to be an insane cult member that was part of a bizarre leftist suicide cult. Wow. Oh, and she was a protege of Hillary Clinton. What a shock. Um, yeah, the suicide forest. Okay, let's see. Um, all right. Okay, dissatisfied convert. Poverty sucks. Single parents and poor is so much worse. Society shouldn't see single moms as normal. It is a deficient state of being for a family unit. We should for sure stop supporting the status with public aid. It's as bad as corporate aid and welfare. Agreed. And what really disgusted me while I was living in California was that I was paying through the nose to get all sorts of medical care, and yet my taxes were going to pay for labor clinics for illegals who were jumping the border to have their kids here. And I would go. When I went to public health, I could see people lining up who were there just to get oxycodone, not to use it, but to sell it. And the people there fucking knew it. The people working at these clinics knew it. Okay, let's see. Computer robots. Sorry, Ishii. I meant, who do you think would be more likely, a baby boomer or millennial or Gen X, to commit suicide? I honestly think right now it's still Gen X men are at the highest rate. And that we had that whole span in our teens and 20s, and now it's kind of cropped back up in the 40s and as they hit their middle age, as so many men have been pulled away from their families and children or taken to the cleaners through divorce. I don't know. David Harris asks, how do you think parents should explain pornography to boys during puberty? My parents didn't talk at all. I think I got addicted by age 15. You're asking someone who didn't have okay, you're asking someone who pornography on the internet in my teens was a GIF file that probably took 15 minutes to load and looked like a blurry centerfold. So that's kind of a hard thing to ask. Also, the content of pornography back then, when I was finding my dad's Playboys, were frankly harmless. I mean, it was just kind of boob shots for the most part, or very pretty girls in what I would describe as almost wholesome poses with interviews. There wasn't much to say. I mean, I'll admit, thanks to my mom's guilting, I felt like I'd committed a mortal crime against all women when I looked at my dad's Playboys, and that I was going to feminist hell for it. But I don't know. Right now with the internet, it's such a different situation. I mean, yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, really, I think until kids are 18, you should monitor as best you can the internet with your kids. That's my opinion. Now, I don't have kids, so take that for what it is. The other thing is, even if they find a way to sneak around you and look at that content, by trying to monitor and limit it as best you can, you're constantly reinforcing the message you don't approve, that is not socially okay, that there's something not good about someone that age filling their mind with that stuff. And, again, I mean, it depends on what you call pornography. I mean, again, Playboys. I mean, I really don't see a gigantic harm in boys seeing some cutesy Japanese girls flashing their boobs, or some really curvy woman showing what she's got on the top of a car. It's just, who cares? I don't see that as being particularly damaging to a teenage boy. But was it Two Girls, One Cup, or all holes plugged, or I don't know, Goatsy, whatever the fuck it is people are looking at. that makes my stomach turn. I don't want to see that. I have no interest in scarring my brain with that. Why are you asking me parenting questions? I'm probably the worst person to ask. Aren't we already living in feminist hell, Owen Lister? You are correct there, sir. I think you're right. We are living in feminist hell. Aged Boomer, the interesting thing about old Playboy playmates is how interesting and how interests and personalities were also summarized in the poster centerfolds. Yes, you know, as silly as it is, I remember reading those things and thinking, oh, okay. So if I want to get a girl like this, I gotta learn more about this, and I gotta dress like this. Okay, she likes a man who's got a six pack. I never got the six pack, but I tried. You know, she wants a guy with a good car, or no, was it knows how to sing. And who knows if that stuff was true or not? But I mean, again, it was all very harmless. All right. Eloise Dahl. I knew South Korea had high suicide rates, and one of their parents was involved in money laundering. Didn't know it was that bad. Yeah, look into this bizarre cult. Their former prime minister was part of it. It is some really eerie shit. The weird thing, it's like Pizzagate shit, but it's not in question whether it's real or not. David Harris, yeah, I think it's good to explain to kids, but to keep them away from hardcore stuff, and just don't make them afraid of appreciating the female form. Yeah, that was the worst thing my mom did. Although I think really she just had something to prove. She was always very slender and very flat, and she had a real hatred of busty women. I picked up on that as I got older, and I don't know what she thinks of Kat then. So I married a woman who looks absolutely nothing like my mother. Red hair and gigantic tatas. You know what? Yeah, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to see if I can't get Kat in here. Hey, Kat, do you want to talk for a minute? Okay, I didn't think she was going to be showing up because I figured this was primarily going to be us sharing horror stories about that moment when we thought we were going to do ourselves in. But it's kind of drifted off into questions of women, feminism, and feminist hell, and raising kids and stuff like that. And although Kat is like me in that we're both kind of terrified at the thought of raising a kid because we don't want to screw it up like our parents did, our childhoods being so nightmarish as they were. But I think she'd have some real valuable information to add to this conversation. They're asking me questions about a number of things.
Okay.
Such as my mother trying to ingrain in me a feeling that appreciating the female form was essentially going to send me to feminist hell, and that it was the most vile, horrible crime against humanity and womankind especially.
Is it that they don't believe you?
Oh, no. I think they're just kind of curious. They also asked my opinions on introducing teenage boys specifically to pornography. My opinion was that I thought, it's different now. I mean, for me, it was crawling into my dad's file cabinet and finding those Playboys at the bottom of a stack of taxes. And those were, again, really tame, very wholesome pictures of
boobs do look like zeros.
with, healthy figures. And it was the 80s. They were healthy figures. And,
Figure eights.
Yeah, definitely. And women, dressed as cheerleaders or sitting on the hoods of cars and talking about what they liked, what kind of traits they liked in a man. It was not like Two Girls in One Cup or Goatsy. I mean, it's just not the same.
But I was never a young man.
Yeah, but I
So-
figured, I brought up that that I married a woman that looked nothing remotely like my mother being rail thin and having dark hair and
Hi, Eloise. Say.
kind of olive tan skin, whereas you're, ghostly pale, red haired, and have gigantic tatas. So, I don't know. We started talking about you, and I just had a feeling you could bring something to this conversation.
Okay. So, what shall we discuss?
Well, what's your take on pornography?
Actually, I think both young men and women should be encouraged to look into it as soon as they get the inkling. I mean, yeah.
Really? So if Junior wants to climb onto the internet and see what Goatsy is, that's okay?
Well, yeah, actually.
You're shitting me. My opinion was that probably until they were 18, that you wanted to monitor their internet
Well,
use.
you didn't let me finish.
Let me finish what I was going to say, Dan. So this is why people like listening to us, apparently. I said that monitor their internet use as carefully and as tightly as you can till they're 18, and then they're on their own. But that even if they ended up sneaking around and seeing this stuff, you kind of reinforce the message that you weren't okay with it. There was a reason you didn't want them seeing it, and that no, this isn't good.
Well, see, I guess then the question is what do you consider pornography? And I know pornography is subjective, and pornography is in the eye of the beholder. Hi, dissatisfied convert. And
Okay, I'll be right back. I gotta get some liquid, or I got dry mouth.
Okay, not a problem. Well, then I will get on my soapbox here about pornography. Okay. I grew up in a household where my mom was very open about me asking questions, allowing me to ask any question I want, pretty much. And she was always pretty good about giving me a straight answer. And so when it came to, those sorts of questions, I knew I could go to her. She answered them the best she could. And then she said, okay, you see that book on the shelf there? You can look through it at any time. That book was Our Bodies, Ourselves. And yeah, I know it has some stigma. But for a young girl, it was good to see it. She also said that I could look at her Joy of Sex book, and I did not, except for like an initial glance through, because seeing unwashed hippies fuck each other was not appetizing at all. Quite frankly, it was stomach churning. But so what I would say is, if you have a young person who is starting to get those feelings, is wanting to know about sex, leave the door open, basically tell them what you approve and disapprove of, and make sure that door is open to them. I also had my mom's Dungeons and Dragons group, so I got that side of things too. I can remember very clearly being 7 years old, and they were dungeon crawling, of course, and they came across this room filled with skeletons, and they dismembered the skeletons but did not pulverize them because the necromancer wanted to raise some of them. And one of the members of the party made a joke about how he was going to make the skeletons, play with their bones. It's like, oh, you mean masturbate? And the whole room was laughing their asses off at this idea of these masturbating skeletons. And then here's my little tiny 7-year-old voice, very politely going, hey, mommy, what's masturbate? Instant silence. And they all had this stricken look on their face like, oh shit, are we gonna be in trouble for making this joke around the kid? And all my mom said was, I'll tell you later. And I knew, because she had set up these rules where I could ask any question and I would always get an answer, that I would ask later and she would respond. And I did ask later. I didn't remember till like a year later, but still. So again, my rule is have that conversation with your kids, keep the door open, tell them what you consider appropriate, tell them what you consider acceptable, but let them explore, really, as long as it's in a safe environment, and they're not doing it at their friend's house. That's what high school is for. Okay. So anyway, high school is where I got exposed to, Overfiend and, all the really dirty crap.
Oh, anime?
Yeah.
90s anime, too. I mean, most of that was
Pretty
really cheesy.
Yeah. Cheesy and
I would have to say that the art of drawing anime titties has come a long way since the 90s.
Yes, it has. There's a fine art to it. What was your father's perspective on porn? To this day, I honestly don't know. That was one subject matter. My parents were divorced. In fact, they were divorced since I was 3. And yes, I did go to Dad's house. That was one subject matter I did not get into with him. I did not feel comfortable. He didn't bring it up.
That's probably a really uncomfortable thing to talk to your daughter about.
Well, it was weird because he did bring it up once, and it was an offhanded comment. Basically, his third wife had come down with a weird condition, and so the whole household had to go on this strange diet. So when I'd go over there, I'd have to have this diet too. And I asked him, it's like, well, why are you on this diet? And he says, well, we do sleep together. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like, I didn't need that image. Thanks, Dad.
Your dad's kind of blunt that way. I've always liked that.
Yeah.
Because he's very straightforward. He's incredibly personable. I really like your dad. Very, very personable. And he'll be talking and he'll just throw a comment and you're like, it's so matter of fact, you don't even blink.
Yeah.
You have to think about it. I remember once he was trying to explain to you why the television show Soap was so good.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
And then out of nowhere, he was, it has that one actress, and he named her. I forget her name. She was in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
It's, the redhead with the big boobs.
Yeah.
That's your dad.
And of course, I know her as Mona from Who's the Boss. So.
But your dad's fun.
I love my dad.
And when my dad found out that he was looking at looking at his Playboys, you know what he told me?
Mm-hmm.
He sat down and had that talk with me. He said, "Yeah, looking at girls is fun, isn't it? Some of the big tits look like cows." Like, well, geez, that was real informative.
Yeah, but your dad's the man who, when you were moving off to San Francisco, he just said, "Don't get AIDS."
And he thought he was actually
imparting words of wisdom, not making a really tacky comment.
He moved me into the dorms. They were driving off to live in Florida for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't going to see him for about a year. This was me leaving home for the first time, the first real parting. And the last thing he says to me is, we're sitting in the cars, well, you're living in San Francisco now, and, a lot of things happen. Don't get AIDS. And that was it. That was the last fucking thing he said to me before he drove off. And he really thought he had said something really wise, and that was like It's like, I love you too, Dad.
I'm sorry. I'm flashing on MST doing Soul Taker. If you can't be careful, name it after me.
Little did he know that living in San Francisco was going to be the longest fucking dry spell of my life.
Yeah.
And probably for a good thing, because my God, that was a miserable place full of miserable women.
Just San Francisco is just diseased in general. I mean, mentally, actually,
I mean, the only fun I had during that time was when I would go down to LA and see an ex-girlfriend.
mm-hmm.
And then when I moved to Berkeley, there was a brief period where I met a girl that lived like in a county called Hercules, which was like 45 minutes away from the shit show. So
Celeste lived in Hercules.
Oh, you know where that is?
No, it's just, it's just, that's cool. I mean, just the name of it.
It's just, yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like having I think we've got a town here called Surprise. We do.
Really?
Yeah.
Pickle Surprise?
Pickle Surprise. God.
Have you guys all seen that Adventures in Awful yet, where I put the Pickle Surprise commercial in it?
That was amazing. How did you find that?
A friend of mine from high school posted it on Facebook once, and I'm keeping this. I'm keeping this. This will be useful later. Just so you know, a lot of people keep asking, where do you get these weird clips from? I collect them, actually, and I'm a little worried that when the COPPA laws go through on YouTube, that they're going to stop having all this weird content that I can grab and add to my collection of supremely strange shit that I might use some other time.
Kind of like when Napster went away. My ability to find cool shit disappeared.
The best part of Napster wasn't the mainstream music that was on the radio or stuff in the stores. It was people who posted stuff that you couldn't find anywhere.
Yeah.
People doing their own bands in their basements, and they're just posting them onto Napster for free.
That was the best. Absolutely the best part of Napster. I got all these weird ass parody songs that people were doing in their, in their bedrooms, which was awesome. That's where I got Germans doing Barbie Girl.
I thought you said that was Rammstein.
I think it was Rammstein, yeah.
So they're saying what their first animes were. Mine actually, I think I mentioned this once, is Star Wars had just come out. I must have been a toddler because I wasn't in school yet. And I had gotten up early. I would get up early in the morning before my parents woke up, and I'd go and I'd turn the TV on, and I came across Star Blazers. And even at I must have been age 4, maybe it had to be, because I can't imagine myself remembering it this well if I had been younger than 4. But even at age 4, I realized I was seeing something a bit more sophisticated than everything else. And I was just fascinated by it. And what was weird was, you remember when we started watching it again?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, usually they say those memories fade, that that your memories aren't all that accurate as you get older. And it was eerie because it was like, no, this is exactly what I remember.
Yeah, but you have an exceptionally good memory too.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah.
I mean, occasionally I've noticed as a kid I'll remember things better than they were. And not better as I mean enjoyable,
mm-hmm.
but that I'll actually remember the scenes playing out in a better way than they actually happened on screen.
Yeah.
But no, it was weird. It was Star Blazer. It was like, this is exactly what I saw. And it took me back to sitting in that first apartment my parents had, on that hideous green floor on a TV that was black and white.
And that's where you're eating off of
cardboard box. This is when they were right out of college.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing this show about a space battleship with a giant gun in its nose. What was it? Derek Wildstar and Nova. So anyway.
Mine was Sailor Moon. I mean, come on. Yeah. Mine was Sailor Moon.
Just satisfied convert. Robotech has to be the standout for me. That one really affected me. I was second grade, third grade maybe when I saw that, but that left, maybe no, fourth. I'm sorry, fourth grade maybe. That really influenced me, man. That stayed with me. All right, we've been on, or I've been on for, geez, where's the time? Where's the timer?
There you go. You've been on for about an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Do you guys want me to keep going, or should we close this off because we're not really talking about suicide and porn anymore. So,
Well, we could.
suicide porn.
Suicide porn, yeah.
That actually exists.
I know it does.
Keep going, says Computer Robots. Okay, what would you like to hear more about?
Tell us your review of Crash.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, you haven't?
I still want to see it. That was that period when I was in college and I was so broke that I wasn't seeing movies.
My only knowledge of Crash is that was when my mom was with her boyfriend at the time, and they gave me a movie ticket and said, okay, you're in that theater and we're going to be in this theater. And they went and saw Crash, and they forced me to see Liar Liar.
I'm sorry.
And when I was done, I was still in the hallway waiting for them for another 45 minutes, and they both came out. Okay, her boyfriend looked like he was going to vomit, and she just had this disapproving look on her face, and neither one of them wanted to talk about it.
Was this Bill?
No.
Who thought that taking your mom to a David Cronenberg film was a good idea?
Phil.
Phil's weird.
I don't think they knew what they were getting into. I think they had just read reviews and said, hey, this looks good.
Oh, Jesus, Phil. Phil, Kat's stepdad, is a wonderful guy. He's a great guy. He's got a very...
he's got a very big heart, and he's a very kind
He's got
person.
a very child innocence to him about him, that he'll jump into things not realizing what he's asking for. Yeah. So, well, I didn't think this movie'd be like that. It's David Cronenberg.
Okay, let's well, while we're on the subject of or laughingly talking about very serious subjects, let's get your review of oh shoot, what was the name of that film? The one about the speedheads.
Let's do a different show for Spun.
Okay.
That would be an entire show. Let's keep answering questions from the audience. Computer Robot says, Ishi, when do you think was when baby boomers became spoiled and took everything in their lives for granted and everyone in their way for granted? Well, okay, I've got to be fair because it's a little too easy to just rip baby boomers, and I myself am guilty of that. And partially because all the baby boomers I'd encountered for most of my life were California lefties.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to get that impression when that's all you encounter. I will have to say that when I started meeting people like Kat's dad or my share of Midwesterners, people from other states, that isn't quite the norm. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons the coast hates flyover country so much as they call it, the Midwest. I mean, even flyover is such a dismissive term in itself. Or the fact that my parents are now convinced that we're living among savages. And it's probably because the Midwestern states and the red states probably held on to the values of the greatest generation a bit more, and that the coasts really probably feel the same way about them as they do their own parents. So it's not really fair to paint the boomers with the same brush, you know. Like I said, it certainly wouldn't be fair to see your father that way.
Mm-mm.
He was a self-starter, and I mean, geez, I don't think you'd be, if it weren't for the lessons he taught you, I don't think you'd be the way you are.
No.
But as far as the left coast goes, when did they start taking things for granted? Well, if you read a lot of the literature from that time, which I did, Ken Kesey, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, written by Tom Wolfe. You read about the 60s movement in general. You read a lot of interviews with like Abby Hoffman and Mario Savo and that whole group. They had all been fed this notion that they were the children of the future, that they were going to storm into the future and change the world, and that they were going to be the chosen ones that brought about the grand utopia. And they almost had this superhero vision of themselves. And it's weird because there were even references to themselves in a lot of this hippie stuff as superheroes, which is strange that they don't like superheroes in comics anymore. So in that notion, there was a very entitled sense. And just like the lefties are now patting twits or twerps like David Hogg and Greta Thunberg on the head, like, oh, you're our saviors. It's the same thing. It's, oh, a child will, what was it? A child will lead them or guide them. Yes. And that notion, they took that to heart. And so that was the first part, that they took it all for granted. And then they went to college. They drank heavy the postmodernist and communist Kool-Aid and waged war on everything their parents stood for. And I've heard interviews with liberal boomers from the era talking about how horrible and oppressive it was that their parents expected things of them. And there's somebody, oh, his name's something Kaufman. He has a channel on YouTube.
Lloyd?
No, not Lloyd Kaufman. I like Lloyd Kaufman. This guy, and it's an archive of all these interviews and documentaries, and he has a lot of stuff on the 60s or boomers in the 80s looking back on the 60s. And these are all like San Francisco types. And it's amazing how much they all resented their parents for expecting them to pick up the torch and to continue working. And it was kind of weird that there was that entitled sense of resentment. And you saw through the 60s, you know, they say, oh, the love generation, the peace gen. No, they were fucking violent. They just had a very good press release. You watch what they were doing. You watch the videos, the protest for People's Park, Mario Savo. They were not peaceful. They were every bit as much violent as Antifa. The only difference is we have cameras now to film them. So that's where a lot of it came from. And then the cynicism came through when they realized they couldn't save the world with peace and love and rock and roll at Woodstock. There was somehow they went to Woodstock and they had this, oh, it was what, how many days was it? 4 days, 5 days of peace, peace, love, and happiness and unity. It proves that utopia is possible. Yeah, if you're a bunch of rich middle-class brats with rock and roll on the stage and LSD in your veins and tons of marijuana, yeah, peace is possible. You know, fuck you. Sorry, as a Gen Xer, that just really eats at me. And then that vision died at the end of Summer of Love with Altamont, when the Rolling Stones had the Hells Angels as bodyguards and they stabbed someone. And then they went into the 70s, which was like, I don't know, the hangover after the party. And they were all just trying to keep going. And it was all just, it was like everyone gave up. It was just debauchery. It's like, fuck it. Let's all have key parties, get drunk, and who cares? The world's ending. They didn't want to embrace the fact that they'd had all their love babies needed raising. They obviously didn't like that. And I will exclusively say this has to do with the East and West Coast. I don't think the Midwest and South necessarily count in this comment because, as far as I understand, a lot of those people raise their kids. So I don't know if I answered it. That answer the question?
I think you brought up specific points where the bloom was off the rose when it came to the boomers.
Yeah.
And
well, yeah, by the 70s there was just the sense of, well, our utopia didn't make it, and there was a real anger and resentment to it as well, and that's when it got really mean. And I know that everyone has these loving memories of Saturday Night Live, but going back as an adult, because I saw those as a kid, it was a staple in my household. And going back and as an adult and knowing the history and knowing what was really going on, seeing those skits through that lens and seeing just how mean-spirited those were and how much they were propaganda. They were you had Dan Aykroyd going on about how great Mugabe was in Zimbabwe and how he was a hero. The fact that Gerald Ford wasn't a klutz, that was completely made up by Saturday Night Live.
They took one incident.
Yeah, and that was a constant thing with them. Okay, I think people are kind of checking out now. Yeah, people are checking. Everyone's beginning to take off. Well, hey, it's been a great night. It's kind of interesting that we started with my dark confessional, and we talked a bit about the shit you guys went through and night terrors, and then here we are talking about Saturday Night Live, anime, porn, hentai, and how to deal with teaching your kids about porn. Hey, yeah, glad you all came out. Good talking to you, David. Maybe we can do one about night terrors. When's our next stream? Tomorrow night, the writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have Eric. Oh, geez, I'm sorry, Eric. I don't remember your last name right now. Yeah, let me.
Let us get his real and true, name so that we can plug him.
And then you can do the hey, how to give us money thing.
I will say this though. To me, what I thought was when I was a kid growing up was one of the most honest depictions of the aging boomer was, strangely enough, Daria's parents on Daria. And the thing that continually has stuck with me was her hippie father talking about how he had been at Altamont.
Oh, shit.
And he had demanded his money back. And they're like, Altamont was free.
Okay, we're going to have Eric R. Killeen, author of One Last Echo, on with us on the writer's room tomorrow night. And we'll be discussing the topic of portraying heroism in your stories.
So definitely join us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Pacific time, 10 o'clock Eastern.
I thought it was 8 o'clock Pacific. Or no, it's 8 o'clock Mountain.
8 o'clock Mountain.
7 o'clock Pacific. Okay.
Yeah, we're in a different time zone now. Arizona flips back and forth between being Mountain and being Pacific. So right now we are Mountain.
So how can they give us money?
Well,
other than buying my books on Amazon and leaving a good review.
Yes, definitely buy Ishii's books on Amazon.com. He has World War Kaiju and Case File Arkham along with Utopians. You can also get all of his books at 01publishing.com, or you can get a t-shirt at TeePublic. There we go, at teepublic.com. And you can also help support us on Subscribestar. All of these links can be found at my website, which is nighteditor.com, or on Ishii's website at J.Ishiro.com. So thank you all again.
And thank you for Aging Boomer for putting up with my shit. Seriously, I don't blame all you guys. I think it's really unfair. And I appreciate that you called me out on that when you did, because no, it is unfair to judge all boomers the same. Every group has its winners and losers, and boy, do my generation have its losers too.
Yeah.
I'm fully aware of that, and a whole bunch of us killed ourselves. They were burnt out on drugs back in the 90s.
Living that Cobain lifestyle.
Yeah, a lot of them just burnt out on drugs. So anyway, good night all.
All right, good night, everyone.